Imagine a single massive engine sitting perfectly at the crossroads of the world for over 600 years. We're talking about the Ottoman Empire. This was a staggering force, literally controlling the routes that connected Europe, Asia, and Africa. Welcome to this explainer. Look, we're not just going to throw dates and names on a map at you. Instead, we're going to deconstruct this historical giant like a massive, interconnected system.
Because it brings up the ultimate question, right? How exactly does a 600-year empire crack? They didn't just grow through brute force. They built this brilliant, highly functioning machine. But here's the thing. Understanding its collapse is totally key to understanding how the institutions, businesses, and governments that we rely on today might also fail. This is basically a masterclass in the anatomy of power.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the crossroads of the world, look at how imperial power actually grows, uncover the hidden problem of success, figure out why great powers finally crack, and wrap it all up with the universal logic of empires. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the crossroads of the world, and why controlling the routes is so absolutely crucial. To really get this empire, you gotta realize it wasn't just some random kingdom drawn on a map. It was the strategic hub. Just look at how it straddles the continents. Goods, people, vital decisions, they all had to pass through this exact space. Because of that, when the Ottomans made a move, while the rest of the world literally had to adjust. So their rise and fall, it's not just local history. It's the story of global balance. Moving right along to Section 2, how imperial power actually grows. We're going to look at the engine of expansion. You know, empires don't grow just because they want to. They grow when a very specific set of conditions lines up perfectly in their favor. Power really explodes when a group can do three things all at once: move, organize, and hold. If you can act swiftly when an opportunity pops up, build systems that are better than your rivals, and turn that initial conquest into lasting control, well, your expansion becomes incredibly fast. Think of it kind of like a shop at the edge of a really busy market. The Ottomans, they didn't start out as the biggest or the richest, not at all. They started on the edge of a pretty unstable world. And border regions, they're flexible. The old structures there are weak, which means new opportunities constantly pop up. By acting like that shop on the edge of the market, they were able to spot those opportunities super early, expand right into the gaps, and serve up exactly what the larger, failing empires were missing. But notice the stark contrast here. Sure, a lot of groups can fight, but very few can actually keep winning. Think of a raiding force, like, say, a disorganized neighborhood cricket team that happens to have one star player. You know, they might win a single match on pure talent alone. But the Ottomans? They built an imperial army. They instituted strict command, reliable supply lines, taxes, discipline. It's that kind of deep organization that allows you to dominate the entire season, not just one lucky Sunday game. But I want to give you a bit of a warning here. Think of pouring water into a cracked cup. At first glance, yeah, it looks full, but the water just doesn't stay. And that tells us something huge. Winning land is an entirely different beast from actually controlling land. Because really, anyone can ride in and plant a flag, but conquest without control, that's always temporary. The Ottomans endured for centuries, specifically because they replaced the utter chaos of war with the predictable routines of rule. They figured out the nitty-gritty. Who collects the revenue? How do you manage the local elites? And how do you actually enforce order? They made people predictable enough to effectively govern. So these are the first principal truths of the Ottoman rise. They combined a highly useful position with deep organization and coordinated force. They truly controlled the land they took, which built this incredible momentum. Think of a cart rolling down a hill. Early success literally funded their later success. And most importantly, they built legitimacy. Over time, their rule just began to feel normal. People obeyed not just out of pure fear, but out of everyday habit. Which brings us to Section 3, the hidden problem of success, and the shadow side of all that organization. So you might be wondering, if they were that effective at growing, what on earth went wrong? Well, when an empire is rising, it's flexible, it's hungry, and it's highly adaptable. But as it ages and gets comfortable with its success, it builds these massive, heavy routines just to protect that success. And ironically, the very organization that made it so strong historically turns it into a rigid, stagnant machine. It becomes this giant apparatus that really only knows how to use the exact same gears it used yesterday. And that kind of rigidity leads us right into Section 4. Why great powers finally crack? Let's look at the anatomy of a collapse. Here's the thing about great powers. They rarely collapse from one massive, cinematic event. Instead, think of a really strong wooden beam. It doesn't just snap from a single gentle push, right? It cracks when multiple pressures hit it all at the exact same time. We're talking tiny splits, moisture, a constantly shifting load. Eventually, that beam just gives way under a weight it used to carry with absolute ease. The empire simply lost its capacity to absorb those shocks. And one of the biggest shocks they faced was military. It turns out military strength changes way faster than political habit. The Ottomans ended up facing a really painful gap. Honestly, it was like a highly experienced runner stubbornly sticking to some outdated training plan, while all their European rivals were rapidly modernizing with new technology, global maritime routes, and fresh tactics. As it turns out, past success is absolutely no guarantee of future victory. And in trying to keep up, they triggered what we call the dangerous loop. Warfare and administration started getting incredibly expensive. So step 1, you need more money to defend your borders. Step 2, you squeeze your own internal system to get it. Step 3, that crushing pressure starts breeding resentment, deep inefficiency, and corruption. And finally, step 4, the entire system becomes a complete nightmare to manage. They were acting poor, not because they had no resources, but because those resources just weren't translating into real power anymore. Internally, this had a really profound effect. Imagine the empire as a single hand directing many fingers. Now, when the hand is strong, the fingers move in perfect unison. But as that financial and military center started to weaken, the fingers, meaning the local elites and provincial actors, started wiggling independently. Taxes became way harder to extract, simple orders took months to enforce, and the center just completely lost its tight grip.
So when we talk about an empire cracking, we're actually talking about this entire chain reaction playing out all at once. Rigidity meets external pressure. Rising costs meet weakening control. And ultimately, it leads to eroding legitimacy, where everyday people mentally shift and stop believing that the empire's rule is inevitable. They just stopped being aligned with reality, and the different parts of the engine literally stopped reinforcing each other.
All of this brings us to our final section, Section 5, the universal logic of empires. Because, trust me, this goes way beyond just the Ottoman dynasty. What we're looking at is really a universal model for diagnosing power. This logic applies just as much to modern states, giant corporate businesses, and global institutions today. Power is always a relationship between your position, your systems, and your adaptation. Think about a wildly successful global business that flat out refuses to update its internal software or management structures. From the outside, it might look immense, but inside, it's buckling under its own unmanaged weight. Which leaves us with this final, really vital thought. The true test of any system is never just, can it win today? The real question is, can it keep working as the conditions around it inevitably change? So as you look at the massive governments, corporations, and institutions that dominate our world right now, ask yourself, which of them are already showing these exact same cracks? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.